Hey there, YouTubers. It's May what? I just turned 61 lately, so I'm like, all the cells in my body are being replaced, right? I'm just kidding. So it's May 23rd, and what I want to talk about a little bit is more autobiography, since I started that last video. I didn't start it. I've been doing autobiography all along, but I talked about high school in the Philippines, going to Princeton, which is a new thing. To be on the East Coast of the United States was somewhat culture shock because I'd never really lived there. And just to come back to the U.S. after years living in Manila and before that in Rome, Italy, with a little bit of time in Florida, we use the word culture shock in our family with real understanding because, and we would like, but as a family, since we were moving as a family, it brought us closer together. It's like, let's all move to the Philippines. Let's all move to Rome. And again, my dad was a urban planner, regional planner, and one of his main considerations as a young guy was, did he want to have kids at all? Because he was hoping for this lifestyle. He wanted the kind of family that could move, and I think pretty much, he got what he wanted. I was easy to travel with and enjoyed doing it. And by the time my sister got old enough to say she didn't really want to do some of these things, um, she was old enough to go stay with friends in California. I'm thinking of one summer when we went around the world. We went through some tough spots. But they weren't tough then, right? As they are now. The world is not as civilized as it used to be. A lot of reasons for that. I won't go into that. Now, what I'm doing with, I'm also going to do a book DVD review. Okay, so after Princeton, I went to Jersey City and taught high school for a couple years. And then I made myself quit because I didn't think it was kind of like push the culture shock button again. I'm used to like uprooting. I didn't think I could be a high school teacher my whole life yet. I needed to do other things, test myself, whatever. And I'd gotten into Buckminster Fuller by that time. Now, I didn't see this movie right away. This is by his son-in-law. Allegra, his daughter, married a guy who made some pretty famous films, Robert Snyder. It's called The World of Buckminster Fuller, a film by Academy Award winner Robert Snyder. I just got it out of the library like a day or two ago. And of course, I've seen it before. I'm a big fan of Bucky Fuller. That's a big majority of what I talk about, actually, is his thinking on many things on this YouTube channel. So that's nothing new that I would want to see this again. What impressed me about it is it's very philosophical. It's about his thinking, is not about his life, about his growing up. There's almost none of that. So it's not a movie about his life at all. It's about his philosophical viewpoint. And he's still alive when the movie's made, and he gets to talk a lot. So many more movies could be made, and there was a famous PBS one which had some of the same, at least one of the same talking heads is on this second movie, Skyscrapers. This was developed for PBS, and when I got it and I looked at the cover, I was like, "Oh, no way! This is post 9/11. This is the Empire State Building. I bet it was made before 9/11, and it's really therefore dated in some way. But I'll watch it anyway. Of course, it is dated in some way because everything is, but it wasn't as old as I thought, and it is actually post 9/11 production." But interestingly, they don't spend a lot of time on the building of the World Trade Center. They do talk about going to where the outer frame can hold a lot of the weight and not putting all the work on the pillar to hold it up. More of the frame became the metal box with steel and reinforcement and stuff like that. So by the time we get to the World Trade Center, I guess their idea is we've already covered the concepts, and it's just mostly showing what we can really do with that. It spends more time in Malaysia than on the World Trade Center. And when it comes to the World Trade Center, it's just, the pancake thing. There was really nothing we could do. These planes are really big. Like the Empire State Building did get hit by a B something, a small bomber, which is pretty crazy, right? But it didn't hurt the Empire State Building that much. It was open for business days later. Now, the World Trade Center, my view on that is whoever planned the plane hits could not have imagined that there was any real chance that those plane hits would take out the buildings. I don't think anyone knew structural engineering well enough. Certainly not Osama bin Laden or these guys training to be pilots. They were not structural engineers, and looking back at the debates, we see that there would have been no consensus going in. Like the structural engineering community would not have had any kind of agreement on whether two planes hitting the buildings was going to bring them down. So I think if we follow the official story, kind of like the official Kennedy assassination story, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, I think it was like if he did, it was he was unlikely to succeed. He must have known that. He was willing to give his life for a very unlikely, like if you really wanted to shoot the president, why would you put yourself that far away? I mean, they're going to catch you probably. It's got to be more of a suicide effort to so why not just, run into the car like Jack Ruby did, and of course there's Secret Service around. They won't let you just run at the car. They'd shoot you first. Okay, so there are good reasons to do it as a sniper, but why way up there? Anyway, he must have thought that there was a very slim chance of success, I would think, unless he was totally crazy. And now, if you don't believe that he acted alone, or you don't believe he acted at all in that particular scenario, you're in good company. A lot of people are with you. And I'm totally aware on the 9/11 thing that most or a lot of people don't think the planes were the only cause of the buildings coming down, and especially, of course, Building 7, which this video, they don't have time. This is friendly for kids. This is family viewing, and they don't have time to get into any quote unquote conspiracy theories at all. So the fact that all of physics is kind of under assault in the form of Building 7, like that was close to impossible. You could say a miracle. So if I had been a religious person in the sense of looking for miracles, and there are people out there like what's her name with the energy beams or whatever, who have resorted to unknown science, which to me is the same as a miracle. And I'm not saying we know all of science, okay? But I don't need to speculate. All I need to say is, wow, that was a miracle. And maybe a bad one, but the people who planned it could not, they must have expected 99%, 100% almost chance that those two towers would survive being hit and would be just standing there, and then what? What was the plan going forward with the buildings hit and on fire and people stuck in the upper floors, and what next? Like, what were they thinking? What were they going to do next with those buildings still there? And they'd need to be demolished later, I think. I believe the damage was so extensive that the idea of repair, they were already losing money. They were full of asbestos. There were many reasons why these were not really great buildings to begin with, I'm told. So they would have had to be demolished after the planes hit, I think. But it would have taken a long time. They would have had to, and maybe we would have gone to war by then, because, there are many things to think about, and it would be worth a whole movie, in my view, where the World Trade Center is hit, but the buildings don't come down. And we don't touch Building 7. It catches fire, we put the fire out. So, and then we go forward from there. Then what happens? Now, I know there's no big budget right now for movies about things that didn't happen like that. I mean, there is science fiction, but that particular parallel universe, I don't think people want to explore right now. But it's where I put my head sometimes. What if things had gone the way people had any right to expect? Now, if you think that these were very um, likely to come down because you knew they were entirely wired to explode or whatever like that, that's a different theory. I'm not here to dispute that theory. I'm just here to say if you take away that factor and just say it was all about airplanes, 100%, then it was a very crazy, unlikely scheme. If the goal was to bring those buildings down, there would have been no consensus whatsoever. And I think when they found Osama in one of the tapes, he said, I thought they'd come down, but a lot of people disagreed with me. I think they were speaking to that issue. Now, whether he actually said any of that, I think that tape turned out to be a phony tape. But I think they understood, whoever was working on that story, that that would be a main thing for people to be thinking about was it the plan to bring those buildings down? Because harebrained if they thought airplanes could do that. Of course, looking back, that's what people say happened, but it's a big threat to our physics. It's like our understanding of construction and engineering, especially around Building 7, but all of them really. What they did and those buildings did in response to being hit by airplanes is completely unexpected, I think, by so many engineers. So, last one, Ex Machina. Pretty good science fiction. I've seen it before. One of the better science fiction movies. Highly recommended. I won't go on at length about it, except to say I think science fiction is the genre for projecting where we are going to go as human beings. We need good science fiction to help ourselves figure that out. And a problem lately is Hollywood has seized on the dark vision of the future, which is pretty easy once you've got it down, kind of Blade Runner, which I've seen the more recent version of. But let's not always do dystopian. One of the things we could challenge ourselves with are better images of a better future that are attainable, not just Star Trek because that's so far in the future, but immediate futures that are simply a lot better than what we have. And that would be challenging too, because it's not a given that we're ever going to have it, but to show that we could in a way that's even more dystopian than dystopian. Because dystopian, you feel better. It's like, well, at least I don't live in that nightmare like Brazil or whatever. I guess it's cathartic in a way. But if we're in a utopia looking back on our time and the people in that time feel a lot of sadness for us, then because we were so messed up, then that's a challenge too. So it could be interesting. I'd be interested in the movies like that. All right. Today's rant is over. It wasn't as autobiographical as I thought. I wasn't in New York or anywhere near by the time of 9/11. I was here in Portland, Oregon. But those towers made a big impression on me. I was studying Tibetan culture at the time, reading a lot of Tibetan books, and I'd gotten involved in studying the lamas and how the system went with the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama and stuff. And it was a refugee culture. It didn't have a real nation, so I was thinking the World Trade Center, thinking of it as a mixed-use building, and what would it be like if people could actually live there full time, and what about Tibetan refugees in the World Trade Center? Pretty weird, right? But because there were two of them, two towers, it fit certain philosophical. Anyway, I was just head spacing out on what was in my local environment, i.e. I was in Jersey City looking at the World Trade Center from across the Hudson. That's the Hudson, right? East River on the other side, and where the Brooklyn Bridge is. And I was studying Tibetan culture, not knowing back then that my parents would shortly be moving to a Tibetan culture or a similar culture, the Bhutanese Bhutan. That's where my family went. They went from Egypt to Bangladesh to Bhutan. And by this time I had gone to Princeton, and then I would visit them in Egypt, and I did go to Bangladesh when it was toward the end of Dad's stint there, which came to an end sooner than he'd hoped. And Bhutan, I got to go there a couple times. Then, my dad was killed in a car accident in South Africa, and I went there. I'd been there before, but I went there to help close the estate and take care of my mom, who did not. She was in the passenger seat and was greatly injured by this head-on collision. The other car came into our lane. I'm told I wasn't there. Seems right, given the eyewitness. So what happens next is I bring my mom back to the States, and my sister and I alternate her on her care, and she gets a lot better. She's still alive. She lives with me right now at age 90 plus. All right, so that brings us up to date. I was a high school teacher, then I worked in textbook company, a lot of jobs, but I've never let go of the teaching side of things. I do like teaching, and that's where this Codesters comes in, and I'll do another video about Codesters pretty soon. I'll talk to you later.